We start a new series today. We finished last week, and I have deliberately left the last 3 weeks of my sermons up on the stage here because I want to use it as a point of reference. Because in order for us to do what I want to do, we've got to start somewhere, and I would like to start at the end of here and make this the beginning of our new series. The title of our series is When It's All Said and Done. When it's all said and done, what's going to be left? Now, we ended over here with a picture of heaven, when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, and we move our way back. I want to begin over here today, and I want to take a real example of somebody who so fits certainly more than half of what we have on the board here. I want to take you to a book, 2 Timothy, chapter 4, from verse 6 to verse 8, and I want to begin at the end. Now, we're talking about the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul right now is here. He's in the 10,000 years. He's been there 2,000 years, and he's got thousands and thousands, innumerably thousands left to go. But he is here right now. But there was a time at the end of his life where he declared what we're about to read, that he had been all poured out. He finished his life with an empty bucket. Go back a step, and he's writing this book to a young man called Timothy, where he realizes that he doesn't have long to go, and he needs to let go of his previous successes. He needs to let go of his experience, and he needs to pass that on to the next generation. And so we see him not fighting to hold on to his identity, but letting his identity go by passing it on to the next generation. It's not an easy thing to do, but he sets a high pace for us. Prior to that, the Apostle Paul had to come to a place where he laid himself on the altar. He took all the success of his training, of his education, of his experience, and he laid it all on the altar for the cause of Christ. And then we go back probably into Paul's 40s or 50s, where he looked at his life and he said of himself, what can I do now? What is it that's going to satisfy me? Let me replan the rest of my life based upon the successes and failures of the first half. Now, the first half of his life, we don't know all that much about. But we do pick up from here where this holy discontent to say there's got to be more to life than having a good education. There's got to be more to life than being able to have a few credentials behind my name. I am just not satisfied. So work it the other way. He lays himself upon the altar. He puts his success on the altar, gives it to the next generation, and at the end, he is able to say the words that I'm just about to read to you. 2 Timothy chapter 4 from verse 6 to verse 8. This is what he says. For I am already being poured out like a drink offering. Basically, he's saying, the bucket, she is empty. And the time has come for my departure. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. And I have kept the faith. Now, there is in store for me over here, there is in store for me a crown of righteousness which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day. But not only to me, but also to all those who have longed for his appearing. This is a great passage, and I want to talk to you about it today. But first of all, let me suggest by way of introduction, you know, there's a saying in life that things run in threes, that things happen in threes. And there are many of us who can, whether it be true or not, or maybe it's just our imaginations, things seem to happen in threes. There's something significant, I believe, about the number 3. It's the number of completion. It's the number of perfection. It's a good number. We see 3 being manifest in nature. Just have a look at an egg. An egg is a trinity. An egg is a shell, a yolk, and an egg white. Have a look at us as human beings. We're a body, we're a soul, we're a spirit. Have a look at God. He is the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. There is a pattern out there of trinities. Now, in Paul's letter to Timothy, as I've read this over and over, I've read it I don't know how many times now, looking for some truths to find for you, I find that there are 6 trinities that he refers to in this particular book. The first trinity you'll find in chapter 1, verse 2, where he talks about grace, mercy, and peace. Now, he doesn't just suck those words out of his thumb for the sake of it. There is a purpose behind every single word that he chooses. So there is a link between grace, mercy, and peace. I'd like to find that link. In verse 7 of that same chapter, he talks about power, love, and a sound mind. That's a great trinity for us to talk about. In verse 11, he talks about us as heralds, apostles, and teachers. I'm looking forward to preaching that one. And then in chapter 2, we have a couple of other trinities. We have the trinity of pictures. He says your Christian life is like being a soldier, an athlete, and a hardworking farmer. Another trinity. And then in verse 24, he talks about the Lord's servant being three things: kind, able to teach, and not resentful. Those are all the trinities that I can find. And he puts these three things together. I'm sure there's a reason behind them, and I hope that we can do the best we can to find that. But today, I want to begin at the end, and probably his most famous trinity is simply the one we read, where he says, I have fought the good fight, number one. I have kept the faith, and I have run the race. Now, I was going to try and whack all these three in one sermon. Not possible to do that. So what we're going to do is over the next 3 weeks, we're going to look at a different aspect of this particular trinity, which means today that we're going to look at what it means to fight the good fight. Now, I want you to notice that he didn't say fight a good fight. We all know he has. We know Paul fought a good fight. He ended with an empty bucket. That's a sign of a good fight. And he says, now I'm ready. I'm all poured out. Now I'm ready to go to my 10,000 years into eternity. He'd fought a good fight. He says this, he says, I have fought the good fight. Now, there is a movement out there in the world today to make the church more neutral, less offensive. Make Christians just be nice people. And there's a movement out there to nullify the extreme faith that we have. Now, I'm not saying for a moment that we become militant in anything and this talk about fight. There's no room for militantness, none at all. In fact, we would speak against that completely. But there is a fight out there that we need to understand is very real. But the world doesn't want us to fight like that. It won't oppose us. It'll just try to make us neutral and nice. If you look at new hymn books today, you're probably not going to find the hymn, Onward Christian Soldiers, marching as to war. You're not going to find that. You're not going to find the hymn, stand up for Jesus. You're not going to find that hymn because it's far too militant. It's far too aggressive. It's far too much for the world. So they try to make us a whole lot less. But then I read the Bible, and I say, man, there's some good fights in the Bible. David and Goliath was a great fight. You know, I read about the fight between Gideon with his 300 men against the vast hordes of the Midianites. I read about the great one. I love this one about Jehoshaphat going to war with the worship leaders in the front, and they worshiped their way into the conflict and found that God had already won it for them. I read about the conflict that exists between good and evil. There is war happening out there. Let's not be delusioned about that. And so I would say to you today, back in the times of Jesus, even then, that nothing has changed. There is a battle on, and Paul fought the good fight. There were others. Jesus spoke about John the Baptist. Now, John the Baptist would probably not be welcome in your church. You wouldn't invite him because he'd probably empty the place. He was not known for his diplomacy. He was not known for his political correctness. And when the disciples spoke about John the Baptist, he was sort of the guy out there. We don't want him to be named with John the Baptist too much, but he was a radical voice at that particular time. And the disciples I don't know this, have spoken with Jesus and said, does he have to be this radical? Does he have to make that kind of a noise? Why can't he just tone it down a little bit? Why does he have to be so in our face and in a sense almost offensive? And Jesus made this comment in Matthew 11, verse 12. He says, the kingdom of God is taken by forceful men. People who are overwhelmed with passion. People who are overwhelmed with kingdom-mindedness. People who are overwhelmed with the fact that there is nothing more important in life than fighting the good fight, keeping the faith, and finishing the race. That, Chad, is awesome. That's what it's all about. Now, look at the church today as you look around the world, And in many places, we look like we've gone a few rounds with a heavyweight fighter, and we kind of look like we've taken a few knocks. We're a little bit punch drunk. Everything has changed in the church. Look at us, empty buildings, preaching to a camera that's telling this to you. I wish it wasn't like that, but it is. But it's not the end. We might be down, but we're not out, that's for sure. And there may be aspects of what we love about church that we're not able to do, but that's okay. This too will pass. And what God is doing is strengthening us for the next purpose and the next round that we will have to go in order to take the kingdom with every ounce of passion that we have. So if the church, and there are many, and my heart goes out to these pastors and to these people who just love their churches, and they've got these little churches here and little churches there, are unable to meet. Some of them don't have the technology like we may have to be able to reach into their homes. If any of them are listening today, be encouraged. It's okay. God has your people in His hands. They're not your people anyway. They belong to God, and He's able to care for them even if you can't. So rise up the church. We're going to do this well. We're going to fight the good fight. Now, this good fight thing infers that there's a possibility of there being a bad fight, and there is a bad fight. Mary and Martha in Luke chapter 10, they fought a bad fight. Martha was whining that Mary wasn't doing the work, and that happens in churches today. And Mary was whining that Martha was in her faith because she wanted to worship and Martha wanted to work. There was a bad fight between the disciples who one day were talking about who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven in Luke chapter 9. That's a bad fight. And Jesus saw them negotiating this. He said, that's a bad fight to fight. The kingdom of God, the greatest, is going to be like a child and the servant of your Saul. Fought a bad Old Testament fight against David. He knew that David was God's anointed. You don't want to mess with God's anointed, but he chose to. Saul, that was a bad fight. That was a bad fight. So there are bad fights out there. We may mention a few of them along the sermon. Now, I want you to understand that this war or this fight that we're fighting is fought on three fronts. The first one is the internal one that's going on inside my head and my heart. That's the first fight. And the second one, we're told, is the flesh, the world, and the devil. The flesh is the one inside me, and the world and the devil are the other two fronts that we have to fight. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the devil. We're going to talk about the enemy of the world a little bit just now. But if you want to catch up on what we feel about the devil and our fight against him, we did a series of devotions, early morning devotions recently, on the armor of God. And if you want to know how feelings towards our fight with the devil, then go and look at that, because that's the armor of God thing. I'm not going to preach that one again. It's already in devotional format. Go and have a look at that. But I want to talk about the fight that is internal and the fight that is the world, the flesh and the world. The flesh is what I'm born with. That's sinful nature. I don't need the devil in order to sin. I do pretty well all on my own. I have a sinful nature. I am born with that, which means that I, at the end of the day, am really my own worst enemy. The greatest enemy that we fight is not necessarily the enemy from without, but is the enemy that is within. That's the enemy that goes on in our heads. Now, this is the key thing here, that we have to win the battle in private before we can fight the battle in public. A lot of people, in ministry want to fight the battle in the public, make themselves look a lot better than they really are. But they've got to win the battle within, and that's a continual battle that goes in. That flesh just keeps rising up over and over and over again. Even David, who we hold in high esteem, he said that he had to fight with a lion and a bear before he could fight Goliath. Now, there was no audience to the lion and bear thing. He fought that all alone. It's kind of like us. These are the things that we fight when there's nobody around us. These are the things that we fight in the darkness of the night. These are the things that we fight in the hidden stuff that's going on below the waterline of our lives. And we have to win that war, as tough as it may be. Paul puts it like this in Romans 7. He says, why do I do the things that I don't want to do? Anybody said that? Well, he says that I don't do the things I want to do, and I do the things that I don't want to do. Oh, wretched man that I am, Who will deliver me from this body of death? Thanks be to God, Jesus handles that. He too, this great man, was battled with his own humanity, his own sinful nature, his own battle within himself. You know, Jesus isn't the only one who's ever risen from the dead. You know that. My sinful nature rises from the dead all the time. It's all the time. Every time it raises its head, I have to kill it again. Because there's only one good self and it's a dead one. But the problem is this guy can keep rising up again. And as we look at ourselves, we say, man, if I'm going to be at war, I'm at war with myself. And it's a perpetual battle of keeping that sinful nature done. Paul says this. He says, we are crucified, he says of himself. Galatians 2:20 says, I am crucified with Christ. That means I'm dead. That's myself. My who I am is dead, and I live now to Christ because Christ lives in me. Now, in a world that is obsessed with self, a world that is so obsessed with self-image and self-esteem and self-improvement and self-motivation, billions and billions of dollars and rands are trying to tell you how good you are. Paul says, man, I'm not good at all. Inside of me, there is this depth of depravity that knows no bounds. You're saying, you don't like yourself very much, do you? I don't like that aspect of myself because that's the area that has to die. The first battle we have to fight, and it's a big one, in fact, I think it's probably the biggest, is the battle that goes on within. The self has to die. In chapter 2, we have the analogy of the soldier, and I'm going to deal with that separately, so we're going to come back to the subject and do part 2 of it when we come to the soldier part. But the soldier, a good soldier, is somebody who dies to his own purpose. He says, I die to my purpose and my fulfillment of my dreams to take on the purpose and the dream of my commanding officer. That's what a good soldier does. He's willing to lay down his life for the cause of a greater cause, of his country, of his general, of his field marshal, of his commander. He's willing to lay his life down for that. That's why Paul says a picture of a soldier going to war is a great thing. And the will to war is determined by the power of your resolve to fight for that cause. That's what Christianity is all about. Now you're saying, Trevor, do you have to be so radical? Well, you may want to throw stones at me like they did to John the Baptist, but I don't think I'm being radical enough. But that's the first front that we fight this war. The second one is the external front. This is the world and the devil. We'll talk about the devil another time. But let's talk about the enemy of the world. No, I'm not talking about the physical world. I'm talking about the world that is out there that would seek to make you like the world, where you take on its systems, you live according to the culture and the systems of the world, you take on their values, and they seek to make us to conform to its standards. Have a look at what the social media is doing. Everybody together, we can do what we like, we can share this thing, we can, and a job is being done on us people to conform to the norms and the standards of the worldly system in which we live. Now, the tactics of this worldly enemy are twofold. Certainly in the context of the world, of the church, the world seeks to divide and conquer. It doesn't oppose us. It just infiltrates us. And if you're a military person, you will understand that infiltration is more powerful than opposition. If I can just get into the ranks of the enemy, if I can just infiltrate their values and their standards and their norms, I know I can divide them. And by dividing them, I know I can conquer, and not even a bullet will be fired. Have a look at the world around us, and you see how this happening all the time. No opposition, no bullets fired, no mudslinging, nothing. There's just infiltration. I heard one person come up with a little cliche that says there's too much of the world in the church and there's not enough of the church in the world. And when there's world in the church, it's like the Trojan horse. We welcome it in. We look at it, we think, this is intriguing, like the story. I love that story, the Trojan horse. Those big horses outside made of wood. Nobody knows that there's an army inside and it stays outside there. And eventually they say, we want to see what's inside this thing. Let's invite this thing into the middle of our city. And so they drag the Trojan horse, and when the gates are closed, the horse opens up, and there's an army, and they are defeated. They're defeated not from without, but they're defeated from within. And that's a tragic dilemma of the church. Isn't it crazy? The church has a great reputation and a great track record for your opposition from without. Don't try and fight with the church, baby, but be careful of infiltration into the church. That Trojan horse picture is exactly what could happen and has happened in many, many churches. But when we're talking about the world, here's the big but. The world gives the church its purpose. It's the world that gives the church its context. Although we're at war with the world, although we're at war with the fact that they will divide and conquer, the second thing that they will do is they will take us as exiles, like they did with Daniel and his buddies. They chose the best, and they invited them into the worldly system in Babylon, and they made them feel at home. They gave them the best meals. They gave them the best rooms. They gave them the best treatment. And they said, welcome to our world, to Daniel and to his buddies. But they were too clever. They didn't fall for it like the other exiles did, and the other talented young men who'd been taken out of Israel to Babylon. They fell into it and said, this is so cool. The world has welcomed us. Let's become like them. And it wasn't long before they were walking like Egyptians and talking like Egyptians and conning on just like Egyptians and Babylonians. But Daniel and his buddies stood firm. They would not be manipulated, even though they were in that world. They were never of it. It's the world that gives the church its context and its purpose. The purpose is found in the Lord's Prayer, where he says, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, which means that the will of God is not being done on earth. Your kingdom come. Your will be done. And that means that the kingdom that we're living in now of this world is not the kingdom of God right now. Satan rules this place. So if you want anybody to blame for the mess around here, you can quite happily blame him. Don't blame God. Satan is doing his thing right now. And God says, my purpose for the church is that they will reestablish the kingdom of God. My kingdom come, God says. My will be done, because my kingdom has not come and my will is not being done. Church, can you help me out here? Let's change this thing around. Now you say, well, what is the weapon that we use in this particular context? Well, the weapon is not a physical thing. The weapon is the weapon of love. The weapon of love. I'm intrigued with Jesus coming to this world. If anybody could have defeated this world militarily, it would have been Jesus. For goodness sake, the armies of heaven. He could have brought them down here, and he could have said, okay, angels, let's wipe these people out. Let's restore order in this place. Something maybe I would have done. Or they let power rule and let aggression. But Jesus didn't do that. He said, let's just rather go and love these people into the kingdom. He sets a high standard. He told stories about loving people in this world. Stories like the Good Samaritan. Go and do good to people. He told great stories about good fathers who let their prodigals go and welcomed them home. When they should have rejected them, they welcomed them back. Jesus told unbelievable stories about love. He didn't just talk about it. Jesus was the epitome of action when it came to love. And he loved the outcast. He was hanging out with the rejected and the lepers and the con men of his world around. Jesus loved, man. And the level of his love was just blowing the world apart. They'd never seen anything like this ever before. And then Jesus stands back and he says to his disciples, you've seen what I've said. You've heard my stories. You've seen what I've done. Now you guys go and do likewise. And you say, is this how we win the world? According to Jesus, it is. Now, many people who have gone into this have had a tough time. People who have tried to love like Jesus has loved. And many people applaud the idea. Some are intrigued by it. Some have been hurt by the idea of loving others. The world has not accepted them, has not understood them. Some have been disillusioned by it because the people who were meant to stand with them didn't stand with them, and they ended up standing all alone. Some of them have been wounded by the idea of love. And the world has given them a hard time, and maybe even their own comrades have done a job on wounding their own soldiers. There are some who have even been defeated by this ideal of love, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter at all. But it's very sad that there are many, as a result of this, who are watching the fight or watching the game now from the grandstands. They've been hurt. They've been disillusioned. They've been defeated. They will withdraw from the fight right now. Well, I have a trinity of responsibilities for you today, if that's your case. If you go to Exodus chapter 3, you see Moses in a similar position to many people in the world today. Moses one day found himself on holy ground. Holy ground. And when you stand on holy ground, when you step off it, everything has changed. And God came to Moses and said, this is holy ground. I need you to get back in the fight. And Moses said, but God, you don't understand. I've killed somebody in Egypt. I've had 40 years in this wilderness. I'm not ready to fight anymore. In fact, my sword is so rusty, I wouldn't know how to use it anymore. And God says, you get back in the fight again. And he did. And then we see out of a holy ground, we have a holy discontent developing in Moses. And God lays his own burden upon a human being. Now, God could have fixed all this himself. We know that. But God always chooses people to do this stuff. And he laid his holy discontent upon one man who changed the world. God always does that. And in chapter 3, verse 7, here's the burden. The Lord said to Moses, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out, and I am concerned about their suffering. That's what God says. There's another Trinity, by the way. I have seen the misery of the people. I have heard them crying out, and I'm concerned about their suffering. There's a Trinity of how God feels on the subject of the people that he loves so much. So he says, I've come down to fix this thing. And Moses, you get the job. I'm going to be sending you. And so when we have stood on holy ground, we will receive the same thing that Moses received, a holy discontent that things should not be like this. Have you ever experienced that? You look at the world around and say, this is just not cool. There should not be this injustice. There should not be this disunity in the church. There should not be this animosity between people. This is just not right. There should not be this competition between churches. This should not be. This is just not the right thing to do. And when we get under that burden of God and it begins to fire us up, we see what Moses saw, where he says, God, I see what you see. I hear what you hear. And I too am now concerned about it. I wonder if you've heard that from God, that holy discontent that God would want to pass to you. Maybe you need to open your eyes to see. Maybe you've been going for so long just seeing it, but not seeing it anymore. Maybe you need to hear the cry of the people out there in the world saying, please help us, please be with us, please give us something. You know, have you heard that cry? Are you concerned about it? And the third of the Holy Trinity that I have here is there's a holy ground, holy discontent, and then beautifully there's a holy alliance. Every time God says somebody to do something, sends somebody to do something, God always qualifies it then to say, you go and do this and I'll be with you. You go and do this. Moses said, you go with, in Exodus 3 verse 12, it says, and I will be with you. That's all you need. He says the same thing to Joshua as he stood on the edge of the Jordan looking at the promised land, and Joshua saying, where's Moses? I need Moses right now. And he says, you don't need Moses. Moses is dead, God tells him, but I will be with you. And there's Gideon in Judges 6 verse 12, where he says, Lord, I'm useless. I'm the least of all the tribe of Israel. I'm a nobody. I can't do this. And God says, yeah, of course you can. He says, how can I? He says, because I'll be with you. And then in Matthew 28, we have the Great Commission. Jesus says, go into all the world, make disciples of all people, of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And by the way, I'll be with you. I'll be with you. He says, is that simple? Well, apparently it is. Let me finish by saying this to you today. If Jesus stood here in this pulpit today, he is here, but he's not in the pulpit. But if he were, if Jesus physically stood before you today, he would have a trinity of questions to ask you. Firstly, he would ask you, do you see the need? Do you hear the cry of the world around you? Are you concerned? And then the next question he would ask you is, are you willing to pay the price? Are you willing to make the sacrifice for the cause of Christ? And many at this particular point would say, oh, that was cool. I do see the need. I do hear the cry. But I'm not that concerned. I'm not concerned enough to make the sacrifice that Jesus requires of me. You have to answer that question. That's question number 2. The third of his trinity of questions would be, can I expect you to engage? If the answer is yes to those 3 questions, that is, as Chad would say, awesome. That is awesome. But if it's not, I'm not sure what you're going to be doing with the rest of your life, because there is no greater reason to live than this. Now, I'm going to ask a favor of you guys watching TV right now. I'm going to ask you to, whether you're sitting as a family or whether you're sitting as an individual, I'd like you to open an open discussion amongst your family, amongst the friends who you're sitting with, to say, if this is true, what Downham is saying, can God expect us to engage? And then ask the group the one question to say, what will that engagement look like? So everybody will say, yeah, I want to engage. But what the heck are you going to do? Well, I can't answer that question. You have to answer that question. You have to ask God, and He'll give you the answer. But once you sit in your family group, don't turn the TV off, please. Don't turn the TV off. Turn to one another and say, are we going to engage? And if we are, what's that going to look like? That could be a great discussion. I hope you have it. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you today for the wonder of the privilege of just being a part of this army, as it were, of standing with you to fight for the cause of your kingdom. And your kingdom must come, not ours. Your will must be done and not ours. Lord, this is a big deal thing. And even though church, as we understand it in a sort of physical context, can't really operate right now, that doesn't mean the church doesn't do stuff. It just means the church is now adapting to the new world in which it lives. And help our people, help those who watch the sermon right now to find out where they fit into the cause for the kingdom. May they do it with passion, excitement, and great energy. And we promise you, God, that we'll do the best that we can to help establish or reestablish your kingdom, because we want your kingdom to come and we want your will to be done. And I hope that we're willing to engage. Go with us now, Lord, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.